Hi, welcome to Dr. Gao's classroom. Today, I'm going to start a new series on classical Chinese poetry. It would cover poems from the Book of Song, which is edited by no other than Confucius himself, to poetry of the Qing dynasty, which ended at the beginning of the 20th century. I would start by introducing a poet with a brief biography that include the historical period she or he lived in, or major event that happened to her and his life, and what is his or her influence in the poetic tradition. I would explain one or two poems word by word. I'll post the whole poem on the screen and read it in Mandarin. This actually might not be how it sounded when the poet composed the poem, because Chinese are pronounced very differently in different historical period. I might do a video on how Chinese sound changed in different historical periods in the future. But today I'm going to stick with Mandarin, because if you're studying Mandarin, it might be very helpful to see the character. I'll post the character on the screen, translate word by word, character by character into English, and then translate the whole line. So when you read this on the screen, you can make connection between the sound, the meaning with the poem. So that's very helpful. If you have planned to travel to China, this is how the contemporary Chinese would read the classical poetry. So you can actually talk about the poetry with Chinese. So there will be lots of benefit to read them in Mandarin. And then I would translate the whole poem. So why studying classical poetry? Well, you might ask, is it relevant to contemporary Chinese society, the culture, and its politics? Well, to all these questions, the answer is a resounding yes, because classical Chinese poetry still play a significant role in how the Chinese people interact with each other and have a very significant role in the culture. Let me give you an example. What is the role of classical Chinese poetry in contemporary Chinese social interaction? Say a mother wants to, tell her child not to waste the food. So rather than telling her children, saying, it is bad to waste food and there's people starving in the world, that sort of thing, the mother actually can cite a poem. I'll just read this. 锄禾日当午，汗滴禾下土。谁知盘中餐，粒粒皆辛苦。Let's just have a look of this poem. So the first line, 锄禾日当午. 锄 means hoe, the instrument you use to weigh weighting the crop. So it also means weeding. 禾 is the crop, and 日 can be translated either as day or the sun. 当 is at the time, 午 is noon. So the line means weeding the crop at noon. 汗滴禾下土. 汗 is sweat. 滴 is can be either translated as the verb dropping, or the noun drop, a drop, like a drop of water. And 禾 again is crop, and 下 is under, and 土 is soil. So when you translate the whole line, it means my sweat drops into the soil under the crop. I actually inserted the my because in the classic text, original text, there is no pronoun about the subject. But I think it might be better because the English would read better with a subject, and we could take the perspective of the farmer who are doing the labor to enhance the significance of the poem. So I inserted the my. So it's my sweat drops into the soil under the crop. The third line, 谁知盘中餐. 水 is who, 知 is know, and 盘 of course is plate, 中 is inside something, and 餐 is a meal. So when you translate this, it would mean who wouldn't know the meal in your plate. And the last line, 粒粒皆辛苦. So 粒 is a grain, like 1 grain. And 皆 is sort of referring all of them. And 辛苦 here is translated as one word. It actually means pageant and bitter. But when you put them together, it usually means hard work or hardship. So, you often hear Chinese when, a Chinese boss goes to his worker, he would often say, 辛苦了, means, oh, you're all doing a hard work, or you're working hard. So 辛苦 means hard work. So 粒粒皆辛苦 can be translated as every grain comes from hard labor. So by citing this poem, rather than, simply telling the child wasting food is bad, the mother actually provoke a emotion or sympathy from the child that all the food that in your plate is coming from someone's hard labor. So it's just not so good to waste someone's hard work. And it also teaches children to appreciate the food and other people's contribution to the society. So rather than just telling them it is bad to waste food, they can actually cite this poem. And the other thing is that this poem is in the textbook in the primary school. So all the children will know this poem anyway. So by citing this poem, the mother can also integrate education into their everyday life, just like, we teach children about table manners and culture things, that this mother or father could teach classic culture to the children, and this can pass on. So it's a very gentle way to teach children to appreciate the food and appreciate the contribution from other people to their life. So it's a very good way to teach children to not waste food. Another way of using poetry is very common among all cultures, that is in pursuit of romantic love. So here is one line. A Chinese boy or a girl who is interested to get romantically involved to someone, they might hand a note with this line in it. Let me just read this. 山有木兮木有枝. Shan means mountain, 有 means there are or have, 木 is trees, and 西 is a auxiliary words connecting the two phrases, and 吹 again, so 木 吹 again, and 有 again, and 枝 is branches. So 山有木兮木有枝 means there are trees on the mountain and there are branches in the trees. It might not mean much because this is just a fact that everybody knows. You could say, well, what do you mean by hand a note to your love interest, this line? But if you know the second line, it would all make sense. So the second line reads, 心悦君兮君不知. So 心 is heart, 悦 is delight or delight in something, and 君 is a honorary way of referring to you. And again, it's the auxiliary words, and 君 and you again, and 不 is a word for no or not, and 知 is no, like we learn from the last poem. So the whole line can be translated as, my heart delights in you, yet you do not know. So if you make the two lines together, it's a very good poetry to persuade someone to date you. Means that my heart delights in you, yet you don't know. My affection for you is so obvious that just like the fact that everybody knows there's trees on the mountain and there's branches in the trees. So it's a very strong affection. So just imagine a shy Chinese girl or a Chinese boy who, it might be too scary for them to go out and ask someone out. They could just hand this note. And if his or her love interest know the poem, I think they would accept, because first of all, it shows that you are very gentle. You're not aggressive in your advance. So you leave a lot of room for them to decide whether to accept or not. Say if they don't want to accept your offer, they could simply pretend they don't understand. Of course, there's trees on the mountain and there's branches in the trees. So what? Or if he or she is also quite classy, they would say, oh, at least this guy's reading the book of songs and, well-versed in classics, and he or she has a very strong, interest in me, and it's expressed so elegantly. Why not? So that's a very good way of persuading someone to date you. This is how, classic poetry play roles in contemporary Chinese life. Next week, I would like to talk about Li Bai. He is one of the best known poets from the Tang Dynasty. Many, of the poem of Li Bai was already translated into English, so we are familiar with Li Bai. So he is very well known in the West for his poetic talent, and of course he's fond of wine. But what most people don't know is his commitment to Taoist philosophy and religion, as well as martial art. He is a sort of martial art master. So I'm going to talk about one of his poems on Knight Errant, expressing how much he admired a young warrior. So if you're interested in reading more classic Chinese poetry, please check in next week. Or if you would like to read more classic Chinese poetry or other form of classical literature or Chinese philosophy or texts on traditional Chinese medicine, you can contact me by the email I listed below. Or otherwise, thank you for watching this, and hopefully I'll see you next week.